Hi and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I want to show you the clamshell soap technique. This soap was very interesting to make as I learned some things about trays and using a specific trays to get a specific design. But let's get into the video. I'm Sue, and if you're new here, I make videos about how to make soap. I want to share soap techniques and some chemistry with you, and hopefully you can find some inspiration for your own soap making projects. At the end of every soap making video, I always show you a quick lathering test of the soap I made in the video before, which this time was the aloe salt soap. So be sure to keep watching until the end. In my soaps, I always add citric acid to my lye solution. I made a video about why I do this, so when you want to know more about that, check it out. After mixing the lye solution, I put it into the sink and let it cool down to room temperature. Next, I measure the butters and oils I want to use. For this soap, it's cocoa butter, coconut oil, olive oil, and sweet almond oil. You can find the recipe in the video description. I put the hard oils into a water bath to melt, which takes about 10 to 15 minutes. While the oils are melting, I prepare the colorants. I like to premix my colorants in oil as this makes it easier to mix them in the soap better, and you also do not need a stick blender for this. This is absolutely optional, you don't have to premix when you use micros, but it is also a great way to prevent further acceleration as you can easily mix everything by hand instead of needing to stick blend it. Today I use castor oil for premixing. You can use every oil you want and you do not need to calculate it into your recipe, it just adds a little bit more superfat to your soap. The last steps I do for preparation is to add some sodium lactate to the lye solution and some kaolin clay to the oils, which I also premix before soaping. Now that everything is prepared, let's start with the clamshell soap. I stick blend the soap butter to just an emulsion and add the fragrance oil. I'm using 8th & Ocean from Nurture Soap. I like this one very much, it is one of my favorites, but I also noticed that it slightly tends to accelerate. But for this soap I was kinda happy it accelerated because I could see how the trace affected the design of the soap bars. So when I make clamshell soap again, I know better how the trace should be for the look I want. The clamshell soap technique is like an in the pot swirl with two colors. But instead of swirling the colors, you need to evenly pour them into the container, both at the same time from opposite sides. The pouring is a bit easier when the container isn't filled up to the top. I use 2 funnel pitchers, so I don't have to refill while I'm pouring. Before you can start pouring, you need to elevate the mold on one side. Later, you need to gradually lower it when the soap starts to bunch up at the end of the mold. You pour from 3 points into the mold on the short side, and when you pour the soap, you slightly wiggle the pitcher. This is what makes this feathering look. And then you alternate between the 3 pouring points. Try to pour the same amount of soap at each point. I counted from 1 to 5, then stopped the pouring and went over to the next point. When the soap starts to bunch up at the end of the mold, you need to lower the mold so the soap continues to flow towards the end of the mold. When you get at the end of your soap, you might also change the sides and elevate the mold on the pouring side. I started pouring with a very thin trace and I really liked how it first was looking, but within short time the soap accelerated and at the end it was way thicker. At this point I didn't like how it was looking and I thought I messed it all up, but after cutting the soap I was surprised how nice it was. I started cutting at the pouring end and I think this is the better looking end. But also the clamshells don't have this nice feathering, they are more clumsy. Nice but clumsy. Towards the middle it is getting a bit better and at the end it is just all the same, like the colors mixed up. So what did I learn? As the trace was accelerating so fast, I now have a batch with a very thin trace on the one side and very thick trace on the other. I like how it came out at the pouring side with the thicker trace up to the middle with the medium trace, but I don't like that it looks so clumsy. I was hoping for it to be more feathering. I think when I was beginning the pour, the trace was a bit too thin. The bars have very thin lines in the feathering and don't almost look like clamshells. So for the next time I would aim for a creamy trace. Not too thin, but with just enough texture that the colors don't mix up this way. And I would also use a fragrance oil which is definitely not accelerating. For the clamshell soap technique, you also need to elevate the mold. I used a towel for this, but I think it did not work very well because it is difficult to gradually lower the mold. Next time I would use something stackable like coasters. You can remove one at a time and so slowly lower it. I think this could also have been a problem with the design at the end of the mold. But all in all, I like this technique and how the soap came out. I will definitely make this again and hopefully it gets better than my first attempt. Which part of the soap do you like most? And do you have any additional suggestions what I can do better next time? I would appreciate if you leave a comment and a big thumbs up if you like this video. Last but not least, let's have a short look at the aloe and salt soap I made in my last soap making video. I linked it for you in the upper right corner if you want to have a look at how I made this soap. As this is a salt soap, it has not very much lather, but it is very dense and creamy, and the salt itself is like a light peeling. This soap is made of a lot of pure coconut oil as well as some homemade aloe oil. I used 20% light discount for it, so the soap is not drying at all and feels very nice, and I really like this soap. Thank you for watching, sharing and subscribing. Have a great day and see you next time. Bye!